Well, we give thanks to God for our parish pilgrimage and our return home safely here to St. Mel after visiting some very beautiful holy sites. That's why this morning I look a little holier than I did a couple of weeks ago. Friends, pilgrimage. We went as a parish, but in reality, each and every one of our lives are a spiritual pilgrimage. Each and every one of us are on this magnificent journey of life. And there are significant moments in our life if we pause and see and feel and recognize God's presence. That makes our life this beautiful spiritual pilgrimage. The last few days of this pilgrimage, we were in the eternal city of Rome. But all of us were headed to something more, something really eternal, heaven. The last few days, we are in the city of Rome, and we are standing right before, maybe many of you have been there, the beautiful St. Peter's Basilica. It's magnificent to see. And as those holy doors and all the beauty of the interior, I think today for each one of us, I think it's important based on the readings that we don't think of the basilica, the large cathedrals, but rather we take a deeper dive into the man with whom it is named for, Peter. Because I honestly believe that each and every one of us, there's a shadow of Peter in each one of us. The one chosen by Jesus to be the rock, to be the leader of our church, the first pope, and now we're electing the 267th pope. But for us, if we can identify and tie into the person of Peter, I think our spiritual pilgrimage has so much more meaning in life. Friends, in our first reading from the Acts of the Apostles, Peter and the apostles are brought before the Sanhedrin, and they're put on trial. So I ask each one of us, is there enough evidence in our life to be put on trial that we are followers of Jesus? Would we be found guilty of being a disciple of Jesus? I think the answer, like Peter, is sometimes absolutely yes. Sometimes in our life it's easy, where we can honestly say that we are followers of Jesus and there's evidence, but because, like Peter, you and I are human. And sometimes those moments we fail. Sometimes in those moments we find ourselves like the rock, Peter, the big basilica built after. Sometimes we find ourselves just like him, scared, denying, not sure of what all of this is about. Friends, when we find ourselves on trial, there is one line I want you to sear into your heart and into your mind. When Peter and they're brought before the Sanhedrin, Peter said to them, and we say to ourselves, we must obey God rather than men. If we can answer that question, we must obey God rather than men. It's easy when we're here on Sundays, but in the real tangle of our life, the real story of our pilgrimage, there will come a moment where that question will be relevant. Do we obey God or simply secular temptations? Sometimes the shadowy side of our life. And that question, when we obey God, that beautiful moment where we realize where we are headed. Remember in the Old Testament, Joshua, They were worshiping all kinds of false gods. And Joshua, Jesus, said, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. You choose who you will serve." And the answer to our own life makes the whole beautiful determination on this spiritual pilgrimage if we can truly see God. Friends, there are two examples in the scriptures where there's a charcoal fire. One of them we heard on the seashore by Tiberias when they were fishing. They just witnessed all the crucifixion and all the events and Jesus' death and his resurrection. And what does Peter say? It's kind of funny. He says, we're just going to go back to fishing. Just going to go back to the way it was. Friends, that's not an option. Because when we have that encounter with Jesus, we just simply can't go back. But those two scenes of the charcoal fire, remember the first one? I think we can all relate. It's in the courtyard right before Jesus was condemned to death. And all those people in the courtyard in the dark, there was a fire there. They said to Peter, you were one of them. Remember 3 times? Denied. That shadow of the darkness in that charcoal. I'm sure every one of us here have found ourselves at that moment. Or maybe we would deny or can't see and there's this dark shadow. But our gospel readings today gives us the hope that that's not the end. But maybe in those real moments, it's the beginning. It's the beginning of something more spectacular. Because Peter's on the shore and there's another charcoal fire and Jesus has risen from the dead and Peter realizes it. Friends, it is such beautiful imagery for us. Because all of us, like Peter, find ourselves in those moments where we deny Jesus. Moments in our own life where we can't see the light or feel the warmth of faith. Fear not. It's not the end. There is the resurrection. There is the encounter with the risen Christ. When we were in Lourdes, France on this pilgrimage, friends, it was so amazing. That whole light. Thousands of people who were in wheelchairs and ill and broken or just on a spiritual pilgrimage. And at night, dark in the city of Lourdes, France, hundreds, if not thousands, had a candle. And there was the cross that was lit, and we went procession all the way around praying the rosary. I don't know about you, but absolutely, tears just streamed down. Such a contrast. Sometimes the dark, but always the light. That's the pilgrimage. So my friends, as we think about the great message today, how do we get to this place of Peter? I think, and we'll close with this. Jesus says to Peter as they're just back to fishing, he's on the shore and he says, Peter, throw your net into the deeper waters of life. Peter, trust me and go deeper in your own life and you will have this abundance of catch and fish. So Peter trusts, he goes deeper into those waters and you heard what happened. Friends, as you sit here right now in your life, are you going to allow to be caught in the net of God? Are you going to be like one of those fish, allowing ourselves to be caught up in the net of God's grace, the abundance of God's grace, to go deeper into our life? And are you willing, as the beautiful gospel, they came ashore and he fed them. And right here at this very Mass is our lakeshore, where the body and blood, soul and divinity of Jesus is waiting to feed us. Question is, do we really believe? Do you really trust? Are you really willing to let go? and stand convicted of being a follower of Jesus. For when we do, there's an incredible freedom. Because even though we are in front of this beautiful basilica of St. Peter, the real story, that's where he was buried. He was crucified. Not only crucified, but crucified upside down. See, it didn't matter to Peter because he found the risen Christ, and that's all that matters. So great message for all of us. So this week, challenge each one of us to answer the question Jesus asked Peter and you. Do you really love me? Not just on the superficial, but the agape love. Do you really love Jesus? And when the answer for each one of us is yes, you will never be the same. Amen?